do it. Let's vote on everything.
Okay, good morning and welcome to our June 20th, 2023 Monday 9 a.m. briefing meeting. Let the record reflect that we have Commissioner Kearns, Commissioner Jordan, and Commissioner CUNY are here in the conference room. Commissioner French will not be in this morning. And I think Commissioner Waldrop will be joining us. I'm possibly on Zoom, so we'll see her when she's able to join us. But with that, just to keep everything going for the day, we're going to go ahead and start with Jesse Bank, the Executive Director from the Northeast Public Development Authority. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to brief all of you. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Jesse Bank. I'm Executive Director of the Northeast PDA. I've been in the role for about a year now. And it's been an exciting year. So on Scott Simmons' suggestion, I think I just want to give you all a brief overview of some of the things that have been going on in the PDA over the last year, and then we'll get into the ask that's going to be before you guys. Is it next week, Scott, coming, or do we still not know yet? Soon.
Possibly, yes.
Okay. Soon. How about that? So it's been a big year for the PDA. I think, as some of you may know, the organization has been really challenged financially for a long time. It's been living paycheck to paycheck pretty much since its inception, certainly since 2019. And so one of the biggest things that occurred this year is we've gotten our financial position in order, which is really, really great news. It's a lot of work with both the city and the county finance folks to orchestrate the revenue allocation strategy for the sales tax. Some of the other PDAs were doing really well on the property tax front, but because the property values are so depressed within the PDA district, we weren't making a tremendous amount of money off of that. So the sales tax influx not only turned the spigot on, but also caught us up to 2019. So we're actually in a really excellent financial position right now, which is really, really great. And for the first time, we're able to sort of put together a bit of a war chest and start to think about what to do with it. So that begs the question, so now what? What are we going to do with the money? So to that end, I've worked really closely with some partners at the city to put together a large-scale sub-area planning effort. This will be the first formal sub-area plan in the area in almost 25 years. It's going to be very, very broad-ranging, touching on everything from housing supply and development strategies to livability, to bike ped infrastructure, to auto infrastructure, to target business sectors. What businesses are we wanting to go after as a district? Zoning, street classifications, and finally infrastructure. And infrastructure is really the biggest challenge we have within the PDA. Particularly in the East Hilliard area, has the highest concentration of unpaved roads in the region, which is really, really disastrous, not only from a business recruitment standpoint, but is actually now being shown to be really deleterious for resident health in the neighborhood adjacent.
And just so you know, Commissioner Waldrop has joined us. So.
Hi. Good morning, Commissioner Waldrop. Okay, so then I will address the screen as well. So like I said, infrastructure is really a big deal. And so this plan is going to put together a set of strategies and a way to eat the elephant, so to speak, step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. But really what I think makes this plan different and really actionable is I brought in a group that I worked with in a past life that specializes in public financing plans. And so they do large scale, district scale, and really will take the recommendations that come out of this plan and say, okay, this is your revenue picture. These are the tools that are available to you. This is how you ought to think about paying for these various items so that we have a step 1, step 2, step 3 list and we can just press play and go. So I think that's going to be a really, really big thing. But we're not waiting really for that to be finished. We've got a couple of major infrastructure projects underway already. The first, as this body knows well, was from the American Rescue Plan allocation that was generously afforded to us by this body earlier this year. That will be replacing a piece of key water infrastructure beneath Freya Boulevard. That project is chartered and I believe going into design later this year, and we're hoping to be into construction in the beginning of 2025 on that. We are seeking to leverage those funds with some additional Public Works Board money to really sort of go the extra mile on that project and really spruce that up. So we'll have a corridor all the way up from Garland to Wellesley complete. And then the next project that we have that's also fully funded and ready to go is from Freya and Wellesley all the way to the toe of the hill on Wellesley. So that's a full depth rebuild. That is sidewalks and street trees and bike path and all of the infrastructure that you would expect for a full complete street. So that portion of the district will be looking really sharp and really nice really soon. It's going to be really ugly for a few years, so you may get some calls from constituents that are not too pleased, but I promise them it's going to be awful for about a year and a half, and then it's going to be really, really nice. So just hang in there. So all of this momentum and the financial position has really allowed us to ask a couple of other questions as well. I think, one, how are we viewed by the community? And how are we marketing ourselves? What are the services that we're offering to the community? How are we approaching businesses with that? What businesses are we approaching, and what are all the apparatus around that? Can we develop our own real estate? We're in the process of a conversation with the city right now to transfer over a piece of real estate at Wellesley and Market for the purposes of redevelopment, to put 30 workforce housing units and some ground floor commercial space, really activate that corner where there's been significant new investment right at the interchange, the forthcoming interchange at the NSC in Wellesley. And finally, do our borders facilitate what we're trying to do? And this is the question that will be before you all soon. As a reminder, per the ILA, if the board and the executive director agree to make a recommendation, they are able to recommend to the county commissioners and the city council jointly to amend the boundaries of the PDA. So we've had significant conversations at the board level about this and about what types of assets we have, what types of assets we might need. Do our boundaries make sense in all cases? Do they have some holes in them? And what can we do to sort of shore that up while we're in the planning stages right now before we kind of hit go and be off to the races? So what we've come up with are two recommendations. And one of the key points with this is an ask of the city council as well as an ask of this body, so that board felt confident that that we should be asking both bodies to give equally. And so we've worked really hard to do that. Ron, would you mind, or whomever is pulling up? There we are. So that is the existing boundaries of the NEPDA. You can see sort of the dark black line there. If you would mind going to the next image. There we are. So in the yellow is a southern and slightly western proposed expansion that is exclusively in the city. And the purple to the north is exclusively in the county. So the city boundary to the south is really looking at two things. One is picking up the entirety of the Market Street corridor. There had been sort of an arbitrary boundary drawn at Garland prior to this that sort of cleaved off the southern half of the Market Street corridor. So with this boundary expansion, we will be able to have the entirety of the Market Street corridor from Illinois all the way up to Magnesium within the PDA's boundaries, and can treat it as a whole and treat it as a proper corridor and begin to do economic development work along that. You'll also notice the bulge along the west side there in the yellow. That is pulling in the Jubilant Hollister Steer property. The goal with that is they're potentially one of our target sectors that we're looking at in the pharmaceutical manufacturing, particularly with all of the research work that's going on in the University District, being able to bring some of that back of house manufacturing that they don't have the space for into the NEPDA. So bringing Jubilant in can help guide some of their growth, hopefully, into the neighborhood, as well as sort of bring that ecosystem within our ecosystem and help them grow in the neighborhood. So the northern expansion that's purely in the county is roughly bounded at the south by Magnesium, at the west by Nevada, at the north by generally Hawthorne and Park Smith, and to the east by the NSC. And the gist of this expansion is land. The NEPDA is about 1,700 acres as it exists right now, and is slightly over 1,000 parcels. So I'll let you all do the math on that, but the take-home story is their parcels are very small. And that limits the types of businesses and the types of sectors that we can go after as a recruitment strategy. These parcels up to the north are very, very large, and they would afford us a wider mix of property types and a wider opportunity to go after different business sectors that require larger parcels, that require rail access, that require wind power, etc. Presently, the only similarly large parcel that's within the district today is heavily contaminated and is owned by BNSF. So there's sort of limited possibilities for what we can do with that parcel. So this really adds a lot of functional need to the PDA. In addition, you have new property owners at the R.A. Hansen site, purchased the site last summer, and they are owner occupying the entirety of the site, which is very impressive because it's approximately 650,000 square feet. So it's a very, very large site. And they have suggested that they're interested in potentially developing some of the site around their the property that they're using. So they've got about 200 excess acres, and there's significant potential for development. They are structural steel fabricators, and that's one of those great industries that's kind of a big fish that has lots of little fish swimming around it, and there is need for those little fish to be housed in functional buildings, particularly proximate to these larger fish that they're serving. So the idea is that the PDA can kind of help guide that process along and help them through the process and help them see the value in redeveloping their property. The remainder of the land is owned by the Douglas family, various members of the Douglas family, and so really the hope there is that by sort of firing up adjacent development on all sides around that property, we can induce them into developing their sites. So that is really the crux of the request that's going to be before you all relatively soon. And I think I will leave it there and open the floor to any questions you might have of me.
Being on the board, Josh, comments?
Jesse laid it out perfectly.
Scott, you're also on the board.
Yeah, we've been talking about this on the board for probably better part of 6 months or so, and multiple iterations of this. And I think where the board landed at, and with Jesse's guidance, I think we've got a pretty good proposal for the county commissioners to consider.
Commissioner Waldron.
Thanks, Jesse. I think this is a really good idea to add those other areas in the city and the county. I remember there was several plans done, maybe in the first 5 to 6 years of the PA, that looked at different infrastructure needs and then opportunities for where you would start with the infrastructure investments. Are they just too old? You're talking about developing a sub area plan, which I think makes a lot of sense. I do know there were like at least 2 plans done, like in the 2017, 2018 timeframe. Did those plans are they need to be revisited?
Well, that's correct. There's been a litany of plans over the years as grant dollars have flown through. We've studied this and we've studied that and we've studied this and we've studied that. And one of the things that we came together with our consultant team on this was, hey, listen, there's been a lot of great work done. So for the first stage of this project, let's take all of that work and do a really in-depth review of all of it and ask whether or not it makes sense in 2023 and going forward. And if it doesn't, what do we need to add to it to make it relevant to today? And are there any gaps between all of those various studies, and what do we need to plug those gaps? So I think you're absolutely spot on, and that's the first task that the consultant team is actually underway on right now, is just evaluating all of that work, and so that we're not being duplicative, that we're building off of that work. As you know, the neighborhood put together a plan in 2010 that, while it wasn't a formal sub-area plan, was a very well regarded and very well thought of plan. And so that is being thrown into this hopper as well, to just understand kind of the baseline conditions and really what questions we need to push on and we need to move forward with.
Has there been any more discussion about the city's property and whether or not part of that or some of it or all of it could be an asset for the PDA?
You're saying the ranch property in East Hilliard? Yeah, there continues to be discussions. Right now, it's in pretty heavy use, but there is a conversation about it maybe being made surplus at some point. And so really, I think what my goal is to do a good job with this first asset transfer process and show the city that we are a reliable partner in redeveloping these surplus assets and creating value in places where there was no value before. And hopefully then that can be extrapolated to other sites. There's at least one other one that I have in mind as well. So the gears are turning.
And you're talking about the site that was the old nursing home.
Correct.
Great. Well, I hope to redevelop. That's a really great opportunity. Although I know there's a lot of liens still on the property, right?
It's actually cleared the liens and
okay.
came through the county foreclosure process. It did not sell, went to auction twice by the county and did not sell. And then the city in January, I want to say, maybe February, purchased it back from the county for the amount of outstanding taxes due, which was $6,200-ish.
And so I had thought that it was still had some dollars associated with it. So it's free and clear.
Well, there is a large city lien still on it, and that's really the crux of my argument to transfer the asset to the PDA is by creating value on this piece of property is the only way you're going to get paid back. You've already tested the market. It hasn't worked. Let me create value and give you a path to be made whole. So I think we have a strong argument there, and I'm very optimistic that will go through as well.
Great. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Just one question.
Vern?
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like there's a lot of really exciting momentum, so that's great. Not having been through a process like this before with the PDA and growing the boundaries, I was just wondering, are there like zoning implications for that need to be looked at, or it doesn't? It's just expanding the boundaries.
Yeah, this is purely a map drawing exercise. So it will actually be an amendment to the interlocal agreement between the city and the county that created the PDA. And within that, there is a map and legal description of the boundaries that are contained within. Now, the sub-area plan may make some zoning recommendations. And I've been in touch with Scott Chesney on the county side as well to talk about the county's 26 periodic comp plan update and about how some of our findings within our study can at least begin to inform some of the decisions that the county is making on the land that's touching the land that we're planning for. So I think there can be a really nice integrative process, but that's the point at which we would approach zoning and land use and some of those things.
And when will City Council be reviewing this?
City Council was briefed on it last week. They will be voting on the 26th. And again, I think once we get our documents to you all and get everything dialed in, you'll see it shortly thereafter.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, thank you all.
And all your hard work up there.
Jesse's been doing a fantastic job, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so next we have Lance Back from the Valley Chamber. Not sure where you want to sit.
Just keep the camera in the same spots.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you. I get to drive through Jesse's area every day, so it's been exciting to watch, and I think there's a lot of collaboration that you'll see from the Valley Market in the Northeast moving forward. So I'm not going to throw slides up. I know we talked a lot about slides or no slides, so I brought copies of our most recent annual report. We're now obviously at the halfway point, so I'm going to use this as a guide for a little bit of the update, but allow to then do some mid-year updates within this as well. So Thank you for having me. Again, my name's Lance Beck. I'm the president and CEO for the Valley Chamber of Commerce. Let's see, 4.5 years I've been in my role, a little over now, so.
Seem that
That's not
Time
too
flies,
bad.
right? Yeah.
You're
So-
starting your second year, what are you
Yeah,
talking
right. So again, thank you for having me, and thank you to Commissioner Waldron online, and we have Al too. Al's
No,
up. Okay.
he's not here.
So yeah, I think I had a lot of thoughts of how I wanted to kind of present to you guys, and having not been in, but having met individually with everyone fairly frequently, with the exception of Amber, we haven't been able to sit down for a one-on-one yet, but I'm excited to do that as well. So again, 4.5 years into my role, I don't know where time went, but I'm excited for what we've been able to do. A little bit about me: I was born and raised in Spokane. Grew up on the north side, was a Mount Spokane grad, so I think we're dominating right now. We've got 3 of us, Commissioner Jordan, Commissioner Kern, and myself. If the school district is not proud and meet of us, then I don't know where to go from that. I attended Whitworth College / University, so same track as Josh, same
Go
year
Bucks.
as Josh, and so I like to think that because we got both the college certificate and the university certificate, it meant that we got double our value out of that. So that makes the student loans that I just finished off very much more stomachable. And so following school, I started my career with the Spokane Shock Arena football team. Worked my way from account exec up to when I left as director of marketing and operations. And so we had some really great times just down the street here. Had a couple league championships that we brought back to the community, and still some of my most favorite memories were of those years with that franchise here. From there, I worked 6 years down on the Oregon coast at the Oregon Coast Aquarium as director of marketing, and then I got my first taste of government there. I served as the City of Newport tourism chair of our subcommittee there, and so we had some public funds that we stewarded, and so my role at the aquarium was a really nice mesh to be able to provide that volunteer service back to the community in that regard. And we also contracted with our Chamber of Commerce locally to provide destination marketing services for the community, and so learned about chambers, got my real taste of it there. Worked heavily with Travel Oregon from a state level representation there. Newport's just a town of 10,000, so but we had 4 million visitors come through annually, and so you can imagine what that does on public infrastructure and whatnot. So it was always a really interesting battle, and some of those things like workforce housing translated directly into what we're seeing here in our community. And so we returned in 2018, had 2 kids now, reside in the first district of Spokane County, the county portion of the first district, I'll have you, so.
It's number 1 for a reason.
Number 1 for a reason, yeah. I'll talk to you about my residential streets pretty soon,
Give
so
me a call.
we'll get to that. So yeah, 2018, right back, the Valley Chamber, we had sat at that point for about a little over half a year without a president CEO, and so we had, I like to say, we were riding a bow wave of momentum built by past leadership, and that wave was starting to finally ripple out as I arrived. And so we did some cleanup of our membership, and really, as we sit today, we're in our 102nd year of operation as a chamber, which is a feat to say the least. We've got 726 active members, and serving those, we currently have a team of 5. We're hiring 2 full-time roles. Director of Community Engagement and Director of Government Affairs. So that'll put us back to 7 here, hopefully, just around the start of July, maybe middle of the month. So excited to be back to a full team. You can imagine as you increase service load and then you decrease staff, it can have this stretching effect that takes place. And so we were really humming right around the beginning of the year, and lost Lizette Garvey back to Senator Murray as the Eastern Region Director. And so that was a win for the community, I think, a loss for us as an organization. And so grateful to get to work with her still in her role, and seeing what we're able to bring back to the region through the Senator's office. And so the Chamber, we're at a $900,000 budget this year. That's about just under a 50% increase from 2019's budget. So we've grown, certainly. We've added capacity, certainly. And then we're guided, our missions: build relationships, drive collaboration, and champion opportunity. within our area. And we had set out to redefine our strategic initiatives back in 2021. Thank you, Commissioner Cooney was sitting on our board as an ex officio at the time. And so she went through that strategic planning process. And those familiar with the Valley Chamber, historically, we had what we call the Big Five, and we wanted to redefine those and kind of focus our efforts a little bit in several areas of that Big Five initiative. And so we still have 5 initiatives, but we reclassed them into things that mesh better with our legislative agenda moving forward. And so those are business climate, development and infrastructure, quality of life and community, healthcare, and education and workforce. And so as you look at the report, and Commissioner Waldron, I apologize, I'll get you a copy, leave a couple here for you on this. I'm just going to kind of run through where we were coming into this year and then where we've gone over the past year. And so 2022 was a year of growth for us. So we, like many chambers of commerce, through 2020, we tightened the belt a little bit, and we focused very heavily in partnership with both Greater Spokane Incorporated and Spokane County on several of the grant programs back to the business community. We really pivoted what we did traditionally there and went from event programming based to really services programming based and focused that. And so as such, with many chambers, some of the smaller businesses still were engaged. We didn't put a member gate on any of those services, so we did those open and free to any business in the community. And what we saw in 2022 coming out of some of those programs that trailed into even 21 was we made a lot of friends during that process. And so we added 123 members there in 2022, and we're up to 76 new members already for this year. We hover at about an 88% retention rate, which is a little bit above national average for chambers of commerce. So pleased to show that. You can see the member categories there. Business and professional services is by far our top category. Interestingly, nonprofit organizations are also a heavy category for us. And part of that is we run an event in the fall or in the winter that's called our nonprofit showcase. And so we partner businesses, sponsor nonprofit to be at this showcase. I like to, a lot of you have probably attended the Homeless Connect, where you have services in one room, and individuals from the public can come around and get connected to those services, as well as individuals that want to volunteer. We modeled this event a little bit off of that same type of model, where bringing all the nonprofits together in one spot allows us to then let the public come through and find ways to connect. Also lets business come through and find ways to find new nonprofits that they might support. In Spokane County, we are heavily saturated when it comes to nonprofits. It seems like there's somebody working on behalf of every cause possible, and if it's not identified, somebody will be doing it next week. So.
Yeah, and I would say every time I've been, there's a new nonprofit that I didn't know about that I find out about.
Yeah.
So it's really a great opportunity.
And that's an event we look to grow. It's been steadily growing over the years. We were up to, I think, 50 nonprofits last year. Right now we have over 75 nonprofits as members of the chamber. And so we're looking to probably try and get that up to almost our entire membership being highlighted at that. We're at a bit of a cusp of space availability, where we've hosted at a center place. Traditionally, we may be looking for a venue that can allow us to increase the scope of that event. So spaces like the fairgrounds have become things that we started to look at and saying, where it makes sense to be able to take this in a spot to spread people out a little bit more and allow for more time, as well as space to incorporate more businesses. What's great about that event is that we partner up business with the nonprofit to allow the access to the business, the nonprofit into the event. So there's literally no bottom end cost to the nonprofit to participate at the end of the day, minus their staff time of showing up. And then we traditionally partner that event, time it around Giving Tuesday, the week following Giving Tuesday. And so there's a mindset of that giving nature in the community. And so just one of the events that I'd highlight there. Programs and events as a whole, we are very busy. There's traditionally an event every week of the month. It is one of the parts, if you work for the chamber, you get very accustomed to having that repetition there. And so whether it's networking events, whether it's a large signature event, whether it's a ribbon cutting, our ribbon cutting count, we are right now, we're pacing right about a ribbon cutting every other week for business this year. And so that's been really exciting. I would believe we're at about 60% of those are new business or retooled business as well. So not just new businesses with a facelift or new business for the chamber, but actual new business in the community. So I know we just had Commissioner Kearns out at the Otis Grill reopening there, and so that was an exciting transition. We lost the business in the valley that had to move because of their location, but they acquired the Otis Grill, which was a retirement that was taking place, and so we were able to maintain the Otis Grill as the traditional restaurant that it's been for the Otis Orchards area, while adding another flair to the menu. And so thank you for being there. I know Commissioner Cooney, you were out of town that day, so I will say that it's been great to see the partnership of the commissioners being willing to show up to those. It really does mean a lot to the business owners to see that interaction and just know that people care. And so you guys make a big difference when you do, when you are able to attend. Fiscal health, the entity is doing very well. You can see we put dollars to the bottom line to facilitate then. Really, when we went into strategic planning, part of the challenge was what do we want to spend the funds on? Obviously, as a nonprofit ourselves, our goal is not to make money and put it in the bank. Our goal is to make the money and put it back into the community. And so we've got several initiatives. Part of the efforts to develop a solid bottom line was obviously to grow the team. For us, a lot of it is these direct connections and direct service to the business in interaction with the business. And so we can only do that with how many hours in the day we have as a team. So we've been able to grow our staff from what was 5, I say that as I'm sitting at 5 today, to 7.5. And so we will have a contract role that'll service one of our grants that we won recently this year as well. So we'll be just over 7 full-time staff. And if being fiscally responsible is the other end. I am maybe accused of being a tightwad at times. So I make sure that we're coming from, I think when you've worked, I like to say the shock years we were a for-profit, but we really had to operate like a nonprofit because all the money was in and then most of it went back out. And so I've been in this nonprofit world ever since I began my career. And so being just really mindful of what's going to move the needle for the entity makes decisioning the process pretty easy in my opinion. But as we look at that, we've been very fiscally healthy, and that's a trend that nationally is something that chambers have struggled with a little bit of late. And so pleased to say that our member health is solid and growing, and our bottom line is allowing us to add services. And so volunteerism, we have a ton of volunteers, so 16 ambassadors, not counting then the individuals. Ambassadors sign an agreement to participate in X number of events and be present. Over and above, we have quite a few very dedicated members who are under the ambassador level as well that are allocating time. Our board is a board made up of 30 individuals, one of which is myself. And then we have, it varies between 7 and 10 ex officio positions that are mainly government officials from each of our communities that we service. And so territory-wise, that's a good question that everybody likes to ask, and that's something that we've really pressed to define more directly of late. And so we have been focused on Havana East. I like to say I don't put a border north and south. We tend to stretch ourselves there, but really saying that, you know, we are going to service Valley, Liberty Lake, Millwood, and then the surrounding Spokane County area, everything east of Havana, which is where it gets fun because then we can really lean into the partnerships. Looking at Jesse across the room, I think we have a wealth of opportunities. We see things like the NSC coming down through territory that's going to border Spokane Valley there. Where does it make sense for maybe a business that's there currently to relocate to the northeast to open up land in the valley to then plug something that makes more sense in our valley community with the adjacent services? And so part of that comes back to that collaboration that we've been doing so well with the other entities within the region. I know I meet weekly with Alicia, her team at GSI, as well as Downtown Spokane Partnership and Business Spokane. That's a tradition that's continued from the pandemic forward, and so the leaders of those entities were on call once a week, and then more frequently been meeting with Mark. I know you got a chance to meet with him recently from West Plains. We have a bit of a geographic buffer between our two entities, and so we don't have nearly as much overlap that comes into play with us in the West Plains Chamber, but with us in GSI, they're crossing over all the time. And so being mindful of when it makes sense to do something jointly and when it makes sense for one of us to carry the bucket on that because it's more in our area has been a point of emphasis for us over the last year to 2 years there. Valley Chamber, we do have a C3 foundation arm, so we're a 501c6. We do have a C3 Spokane Valley Chamber Foundation. Our purpose is to do educational scholarships, and specifically, we award funds to CTE track roles. And so looking at that, we see a lot of machining certificate-minded individuals, a lot of welding, we've done some diesel technician scholarships recently, and so primarily students going to either North Idaho College, Spokane Community College, or one of our trade schools specifically. And so we just finished our current evaluation. We're going to give out about $20,000 this year, it looks like. So that's really exciting and a fun arm for us to be able to play with, and really does a great job of tying in. I'll talk with that on our strategic initiative when it comes to the education and workforce there. We too, like West Plains, had launched a new website last year, and so we've been pleased to roll out a couple new tools like member feature stories to be able to drive a little more detail about our members and what they're doing, and bring page views back. I like to say that I won't go into a ton of detail on this, but our SEO is fantastic, and if you visit and do your standard Googling of many of our members there, we're going to be first page listed. One of which that is maybe the bane of our existence is the Amazon fulfillment facility in the Valley. They don't have a phone number listed anywhere. And so we get an awful lot of calls for that facility to find out how you can touch base with them, which is a unique wrinkle of just SEO working sometimes too well for you. So we've developed some really strong partnerships with some of our business members to help make sure we get the consumer to the right spot as they're searching for how to contact them. So as I look at that, I do want to dive into the strategic priorities because that's where the bulk of our work is these days. And so I mentioned the 5 priorities there: business climate, development and infrastructure, quality of life and community, healthcare and workforce, and education. Under those, as I kind of jump through these, I'll pick the order in no specific order, but business climate, we really looked when we had that. We've got 2 programs we're running right now currently out of that strategic priority. One of them was to create an Advocacy 101 course. And so what we found was our government affairs had picked up pace, and we have been doing so much more on that front. It deserves its own subsection, so I'll finish with that today. But one of the pieces that we found within that in talking with our representatives, both on a local level, but then on a state and federal level, was they really wanted to hearing from the association was great, but hearing from the individual business was what they really wanted to. And oftentimes the business doesn't have somebody confident to stand up and present with the elected. And so we've created an Advocacy 101 program. We've run 2 cohorts through that already this year and continue to do that quarterly. And so we're finding through our government affairs committee, we're finding businesses that are interested in being willing to stand up and testify and running an individual from their program through that to be able to build acumen, as well as just if they're interested in beginning to understand how they might engage. And so kind of taking people from all various levels of skill set when it comes to engaging with government and running them through those programs, and just building a baseline of this is what's to be expected. This is how you might address a group. This is where we might go from there. And then tied together with that was actually, this was kind of is it a chicken or an egg, but it was determined that we felt civility in our community was one of the key priorities that our board came out of that strategic planning process with. And so we've created a civility course, and we've actually ran, I think we're up to 75 individuals through that. We started that last fall, and so we run that every other month. We also don't member gate that program, so we kind of open that as a tool for developing membership. But part of that is the idea that I'll use a very direct one, local politics are really not partisan or shouldn't be on a lot of levels, where we have the ability to say, what's best for our local community. It should be easier to arrive at, and often our tone and temperature of how we interact with each other is a barrier that we saw between us and a solution. And so we said, do you run them through Advocacy 101 first, or do you run them through the civility course first? There's not a yes, no, right, wrong, or other to that. We like to say that if you're going to take one, we like to encourage you to take the other. And so That's been a fun program to be able to get off the ground, and one that we've actually been really pleased with the engagement surrounding it. And then the key is then getting them in front to actual advocacy at the end of the day. And so it's been fun to see that come full circle with several individuals where they've actually testified in front of city council, or most recently in front of the state legislature. And a couple had even referenced the aspect of learning how to do that based on the programs that the chamber have provided. So moving on from business climate, I'm going to jump to healthcare real quick. We're in the process of bringing the Business Health Trust as a partnered service back to Spokane. And this is a health association plan that's done, originally was developed out of the Seattle Metro Chamber of Commerce. GSI had partnered with it for several years. It's been absent. There's been no local chamber that's been able to provide association tie here. And so if a business in Spokane County was looking to be able to access that health plan, they would have to join. The closest chamber to us actually was the Yakima Chamber most recently. And so they were spending money on a membership with the chamber completely out of their jurisdiction to be able to access the health plan. And so we're in process of bringing that plan back as a partnered entity to where a business could be a member of the Valley Chamber to gain access to that health plan. And so, and then from there, we've really still leaned towards saying mental health in the workplace is the key that we've been developing programming around. And so we've had several lunch and learn workshops tied to that specific topic. And we see that as a key with the employers right now. They still are really struggling with the mental health in the workplace. It's been a carryover. It was a strong point that we saw a lot of feedback on in the pandemic years, but moved forward, and it continues to be a major challenge. Next up would be our quality of life and community that I'll touch on. So we had two kind of key points out of this committee. One was a destination development sense of projects, and then the other was tied to our sense of community and place, and that really came back to public safety tone is what our committee ended up focusing on. And so most recently, I know we had several in attendance at the Public Safety Appreciation Awards that we held at Center Place earlier this month. And so that event was derived from this committee. It replaced a longstanding kind of recreation-based event that we would highlight, a form of recreation development within the Valley community. We pivoted that and took a firmer stance on the need for public safety and safe communities within our eastern side of the county there. And so we were able to recognize the Deputy of the Year for the Sheriff's Department and the Officer of the Year for the Valley PD. And so thank you to the county for that partnership on that front, and thank you to those who were able to be in attendance. For chambers across the country, chambers have traditionally, the last several decades, steered away from public safety. It hasn't been a topic that you've dove a lot into, and what we've seen is the feedback over the last couple of years with our membership as a whole has been that public safety is this major issue impacting business. And so our office is located at the corner of Sprague and University, and I can tell you that homelessness is not a downtown problem. Homelessness is a countywide problem, and so it's not all crime is related to homelessness either. I have a lot of cameras on my buildings, and there's a lot of people who are not homeless doing things that are not helpful to our business. And so we partnered with Valley PD and Liberty Lake PD, and then the Sheriff's Department to bring services and align services that are possible to impact business directly, getting those officers who are liaisons to the business community more directly and quickly in touch with the right staff members at the PD and Sheriff's Department has been really key to solving some very easily solved problems. But until you get that officer on site to do the evaluation to see what your facility is dealing with, it can feel like there's this huge void for a business owner. They don't know where to go. And so that's that unique spot of where the chamber, having the relationship, is able to step in and facilitate a quicker, more direct connection. And really PD crime check is overwhelmed in many ways. And so if we can find that ability to streamline that service to where we get you in touch with the right person as a business owner, we've had a lot of success over the last year. And so it's exciting to see where that might go next. And so part of this was a very direct formal public presentation of the support that the business community has for our law enforcement agencies. And so I anticipate a lot of engagement around the jail conversation, just seeing as to what's coming up next, trying to drive feedback from your business community out on the east side of the county back into that decisioning process. I know that's going to be a major topic, and so we've been working jointly with the other chambers throughout the region to come up with how we can engage from a business perspective, right? That's always the tough piece, because businesses can't vote, but they have a lot of people who can vote, and so finding a way to create that feedback mechanism in a productive way and stimulate good conversations has been a major component of that. I'm going to go to development and infrastructure. Probably the thing I'm most excited about. We're working on a new component of our website. Again, a capital investment from the chamber into the site development. That will be a development tracker for the east side of the region here. And so not only being able to highlight projects that are coming online, but being able to highlight available land. This is one of those weird spots where the Valley market not having a PDA, we get quite a bit of inquiry into, somebody's a little adverse to maybe going directly to one of the two cities about their project concept right off the bat. And so we do field a lot of input from business development individuals on where might be the right spot. And so for us, not only highlighting what's being done out there, we've had a tremendous growth. I think there's no hiding that fact that we've added quite a bit of medium and small business to the Valley market. We have space, although it's getting more limited now. And some of what's left downtown, we've landed and kept in market out there. And so I will paint a rosier picture than maybe somebody from the downtown core might paint, but I think that's okay. Things are going to move, things are going to pivot around. One of the pieces that we saw, we have a very similar market to ours that is running a tool like this that's been on the private sector side. And we tried initially to really develop the appetite by partners in the region to host this on their own and make it a truly regional tool. I think what we're going to do is we're going to plant the seed with this project and show that it will bring eyeballs to available space. We'll highlight the right projects and spur investment alongside areas that are seeing investment. And so we will have that launched, it looks like, by August, which is really exciting, and then begin the process of consistently seeding content. And so it's a unique tool because it's a balance of permit tracking and then also being ahead of the curve with the developers that would like their projects talked about prior to launch. And so you can both spur excitement around a project to get it over the hump and get it started, or you can also, we're going to have that relationship where as a chamber we have business members, we have a lot of developers, we have a lot of commercial brokers, we have a lot of architects, those firms that are working on these projects that are being discussed, being hypothesized, being kind of filled out in the community. And so as we launch this, we hope to be a balance of all those relationships and being ahead of the curve and spurring investment using the tool. So and then we've talked almost directly with all of you. I think, Amber, you're the last one, Commissioner Holder, that we haven't talked about the Central District, but I do think it's worth noting in here. We spent an awful lot of time in 2022 developing a concept in partnership with GSI around the Central District. Central District being put a bullet on the fairgrounds and draw a big triangle around it. And so that's still very much alive and something that we're going to dust off and re-push for as we get into the second half of 2023 here. That point I would leave with is that we get very focused on the current biggest problem at hand. And in one way, I think we miss in this community the opportunity that is in front of us to focus on forward paths. And so as we look out there, there's a couple of components here with the federal funding packages that are available. It's a tight window for us to capitalize on those as a community. And so I would put that our entity, along with our partners, are very much looking at this saying, what can we do that will spur investment and take advantage of these opportunities and these federal funds? And no one's fully resourced to evaluate all of the programs that are out there. I think that's one of our biggest challenges. I look at this, I've got 2 open positions that very much would be doing that work right at this present moment, much like our other partners in the community. And so I think that that's this piece that we have to solve for still. And so it's a point of emphasis as we look moving forward there. And then very last piece, open to questions after this, the education and workforce work we've been doing. There's no one in economic development that's not touching economic or workforce and education. We're all doing it in semi-unique ways. The thing that I would tell you is that we're trying to do it where we're not duplicating services. And so Valley, one of our focuses, the thing I'm most proud of, we just piloted this. And when I say pilot, we had a 5th grade program we wanted to pivot to from our Lemonade Day work that we had done in the past. And so we've talked, have the blessing of having all 4 Valley School District superintendents sit on our board. And we talked about a new plan to engage 5th graders in some soft skills. And so there's a program called The Amazing Shake, a simple aspect of how you introduce yourself, shake someone's hand, start a conversation. It's a really neat program. If you haven't had the chance to look at it, reach out to me. I'll show you a video that does a good job of summing it up. I will say sometimes when you pilot things, I wasn't expecting 58 5th grade classrooms in the Central Valley School District to be my pilot this year. And so we were expecting a start in the fall of 23 and 24 school year here. And so a lot of credit goes to CV and as a partner in the Central Valley School District, took this, ran with it, found us class time to be able to allocate to this. And then the business community stepped up with 75 business professional volunteers to go in and be assistant judges in that. We had everything from State Representative Suzanne Schmidt in there to a front desk clerk from any of our banks. I mean, the list goes far and wide as to who went into the schools, but the partnership to get community individuals into the buildings, the partnership to get this across all the classrooms, to give us a giant test bed to then prep for the fall where we're going to roll it out hopefully to all 4 school districts. And what I'll leave you with is we had parents calling, asking the schools, why is my kid wanting to shake my hand all the time now, and what are you guys doing? We had a student or 2 or 3 call out sick that day because they were so nervous for the competition part, which you might say, that maybe not that, but honestly, it's a sign that the program was doing what it was doing and intended to do, that these students were taking it seriously. And we look to have a regional competition, so we'll invite all of you to be judges at the regional level competition for this next year when we bring the 4 school districts together with their winners from each classroom. But really fun to see the principals and the staff from the buildings talking about how walking around, they had these kids that were super shy, and all of a sudden those kids were looking them in the eye, shaking their hand, asking them how their day was, and it was all in prep for that. They're like, why didn't we do this at the beginning of the school year, where we set a culture for this in the building, that's what would be normal. And so it's fun community programs like that get me really excited for the ways that we can activate our membership. 726 members. I don't get to talk with every single one of them every year. And so you look at that and find ways, what can we grow this to give opportunity for businesses to engage? What type of cool programs can we pull together that do move the needle? And if you need help understanding why a 5th grader learning how to shake a hand moves the needle in this community, ask any employer how they're doing with hiring staff at an entry level. This is one of those keys that we've just stopped focusing on, and we need to get back to. Soft skills are a direct translation into workforce down the line. And so with that, I'm open to questions. I know I probably took way longer than I was allotted. Mary gives me a mic every now and then, and I'll take liberty.
Well, I did give him the, okay.
She gave me the hook.
So any questions?
For your civility program, can you make referrals?
Yeah. We've had a few of those come in, yeah.
Self-referral is what I'm talking about, yeah.
I think what's interesting, the Tom Foley Foundation and the George Nethercutt Foundation, we've had conversations with both of them. And so you think two entities that probably wouldn't have seen eye to eye, and they're both working on civility, and then we rolled it into this. Our speaker for our Manufacturing Matters is working on an article for Forbes. She's a lead professor out of the University of Tennessee Supply Chain Management School. And so when she heard about it and she was in town for our Manufacturing Matters event last fall, she's like, "What, you're doing what?" And you're intentionally asking really hard questions of people to sit and talk one-on-one with each other. So it's been a really neat program. Anybody that wants to attend it, will open up a spot for you.
I think it's amazing, So for me, being on the Valley Chamber Board for 5 years, and now Josh has taken over for me as he's taken over more of the Valley District, with the redistricting. But, what Lance has done at the Valley Chamber is pretty amazing, and it's not just the normal business chamber. I mean, he's gone above and beyond on engagement, and like we said, not having a PDA out there. I mean, he really is kind of that conduit for a lot of businesses and people calling on what are the opportunities, and he knows how to connect people and get them there. And the events that you do are pretty amazing. So I mean, from the nonprofit, I wasn't able to go to the business one up at Arborcrest here recently, but I've heard great things about how that event went as well. As well as then advocating, he was really a big part of the North-South corridor when the funding was getting taken away. I think I gave you a shout out the other day because he truly was, like, this is happening, what do we need to do? And he was, really one of the ones that the spark plug to start to advocate, get that advocation going on the chamber side, and working with, I know Cheryl and other partners in the community to say how, we all have to do this and not just have it be one group. And so the Valley Chamber's really been key, I think, on a lot of things, and their workforce development, what they're doing out there is, with bank staff and different organizations out there is pretty amazing, which is part of why you're seeing the scholarships go to kids that are looking at shading and
Yeah,
building and
the
all of that.
CTE has been a big push. It does, we have SVT right across the parking lot, so competitive advantage with those students right there for us to talk with. But helping, when we talk advocacy, I'll note we have, it's over 12 million in state capital budget came back to the 4th district. We've added 100% on our projects we advocated for this past session. And a lot of that I would attribute to, I think what we've done really well is the spirit of collaboration that you've seen between your entities like ourselves, GSI, West Plains Chamber, the emphasis to not duplicate services. That's a pressure that's coming back from the private sector, not just the public sector, on our entities. And so we're trying to be mindful of, finding programming that makes sense, where it can align. We're the recipient of a CCW grant based on Manufacturing Connect. So we're going to be doing a large program this next school year, connecting students directly into the manufacturing facilities to show them, what does an Acme Machine Works do inside their shop? Because a lot of kids, they see the front of the building and they never have a clue as to what's happening inside there. And so just trying to put eyeballs on it. I think the end of the day, we are automating. We are going those directions because we do have less humans. We're not producing kids at the same rate. But the reality for our manufacturing sector is they're still going to need to increase workforce for the next 10 to 15 years. That problem's not going to automate itself right at the moment. And so we need to do more to attract those businesses. And we do have healthy schools. And so we're trying to just keep that partnership. I do think that's one of our best features is that we do have all 4 of those school districts in the Valley market engaged with the chamber, and that creates a conduit to be able to have really healthy conversations to hopefully fill different spaces like Jesse was talking about in our community with new development. And so as we come up next year, I think from a development perspective, we're looking at how we're going to engage around the UGA conversation. I think the Valley, we've built a lot recently, and a lot of our large blocks have been filled in. And so where's the growth next take place? And so part of that central district conversation again is how do we redevelop some of the space that's being underutilized? And so as we see a Knife River move from the core of our community to the edge of our community, and we're going to open that facility here later this fall, what goes back into the center to refill that space? So no shortage of things to work on.
No, and you're doing a great job, so thank you. I just saw in the chat that Amber had to get off, but she wanted to say thank you. She's doing a great job as well, and hopefully you guys will get to connect.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So-
Lance.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, that's gonna take us to, okay, so Matt, you're here, but are we pushing the general description of the county forces authorization? And okay, just making sure. So then Matt, you're here with Deborah Perkins.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Monty Chamberlain's a little under the weather this morning, so we'll wait for him to get back through the county forces presentation. Keeping with our theme of the valley, Deborah has a property out in the valley she'd like to talk to you about a little bit.
I do. We have received 2 offers on one of our pieces of property. It's Appleway and Dishman Road. We acquired this property back in September 26th of I'm not talking very well this morning, 1986. So we acquired it for $131,352.50 from Dishman Building and Realty for the Valley Couplet, which we built in 2000. So the city of Spokane Valley incorporated in 2003 and demanded that all the properties that were located within their jurisdiction be turned over to them. And we went into a lawsuit and we finally won it. So we were going to immediately put this property up for sale, but then the water district in that neighborhood didn't have water for development at that time. And so it took them 3 to 5 years to get water for their region. So in 2016, we had an appraisal done on this property for $591,000 from Value Logic. And I met with the board and the board set the minimum bid at $600,000 at that time. Then in 2019, we had it reappraised and it appraised for $588,000 from Value Logic, so we kept it at 600. Then in November of 2022, in the pandemic time period, it was very hard to get an appraiser to appraise property at this time. We got an appraisal for $475,000 from Data Trend Services. And I had some problems with the drop in the number like this. And I talked to some people and they were saying that, housing's going up, but marketing on commercial properties going down. I was holding off on it, but it was decided that since all of our properties are in auction anyway, to go ahead and put it on. We're past the 6-month period now with my offers, but we have 2 offers. And in the meantime, our legal counsel has advised us that our procedures need to change on how we are offering properties and stuff. And so what they have advised us is for us to go in front of the board and have the board set a minimum bid for a piece of property and then direct us to have an auction on the property separate. So what I'm planning on doing, if you guys agree to set the minimum bid at, I guess we're the appraised value of $475,000. Once you guys set the minimum bid, then we will hold an auction. And this year I have the treasurer is going to be auctioning off my tax title properties. And so we might combine that with the treasurer's auction and get more. I've got at least 2 people who want to buy the property. I've had many inquiries about it. So I'm thinking that we probably got 5 or so people who are really interested in this piece. So we should have a bidding war. But
What's the assessed value on it? Do we have one? I guess I don't know.
I don't have it in my brain, I'm sorry, but it's less than this. It's always
interesting. I'm with you. I find it very interesting how the property could go down in value when it's a major corridor for commercial use. I'm seeing how, I go by there all the time. I'm seeing housing going up, in just little lots next to it that I find it. And how big is the 2 parcels?
they're about a little less than 2 acres together.
I just find that. So the last appraisal was done in 2019?
The last appraisal was November of 2022. And so I I did talk to the appraiser, I did argue with the appraiser, he was very adamant. But,
What are other, I mean, I guess I'd wanna know what other comparable sales are.
I looked around when I was reviewing his appraisal to try to see, and I looked at his comps. And I could find a couple that were higher, but not in that area because it wasn't changing hands so much, that kind of property, so myself, you know, I don't know if you guys wanna raise the minimum bid to 500,000, or if you wanna stick with this 475. You guys get to set the minimum bid. I mean, you could go through and totally say, Deborah, it's past 6 months, go get us another appraisal. You know, I'm happy to do that, but we do have 2 people on the line that have given us purchase and sell offers. So if you guys wanna go forward, you know, and then have it, you know, auctioned off.
I guess for me, I need to think about it just a little bit more. I mean, I just think that's interesting. I mean, honestly, it'd be good if Lance would have stayed. He would have an idea there.
Combined assessed of the 2 properties is just over 356,000.
Well, you said there was previous appraisals done. Can you repeat when and how much those
Yeah.
were?
So I had appraised at,
Or assessed, I'm sorry, assessed is what I meant, sorry.
Yeah.
Assessed 356.
2016, I had $591,000. 2019, I had $588,000, but then this November 22, 475, and I was, you can tell I wasn't happy, but,
I have not seen property values come down since 2015. So
I would have put it out for another appraisal, but we'd had so much problems getting anything appraised.
right at that time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not comfortable with the appraisal, so I just,
Would you guys like to direct me to get another appraisal?
So our options are to direct you to get another appraisal, or we can set a minimum bid ourselves, but yet I would still need a little bit of time to feel comfortable what I think that minimum bid should be. I mean, it was 600, you said in the past.
590.
It was our last one in 2019, so just before the pandemic hit, we had 588 for our last appraisal. And then after, well, I guess you could say during the pandemic, 475. I had not had any bites on that property from 2016 up. I mean, I'd get people calling me and saying, you know, how much, that's too rich for my blood, you know, kind of thing, but so.
Yeah, no, developers are looking for any kind of property right now to, because it's in the UGA, so it's got all the utilities. You said there was an issue in the past with water.
Yeah.
But water's there now.
Water's there now, so water's available, and we've got.
I'm not comfortable moving forward at this time. So I don't know if we want to think about it for a week and have you come back next week and determine if we want to go out for a bid or a new appraisal or just set a minimum bid.
You guys want to direct me to get you more information in some way? I could go and find properties that have all sold in this area and come up with a list of what is sold in the
Yeah, well, and I
last year.
think see what the previous appraisals, maybe the past 2 appraisals then. Can we see what the past 2 appraisals?
You want the actual documents?
Yeah, because I'd like to see what the comps were.
Would you like me to email them to you guys today? I could do that.
And then if you have any other recent comps, recent properties that have sold in that area.
Yeah, I'll find those for you.
Because I know along that corridor, it's been over several years, but there's been properties that have sold and developed.
Well, I just got the appraisal for University in Alphaway. And that was before, when I had this one at 600, that one had been at 400. They've got that one at, I think it was 514 that they just, so that,
Properties aren't going down in value.
And that one you're talking about is a smaller property too.
yeah, it's smaller.
So we need more information to make a decision on this, because I think even if we're gonna have a bidding war, it's like we still need to have a proper minimum to set it out.
Yeah.
So, because it's, I guess, and I need to make sure, is the zoning, what the zoning is on it?
It's,
Is it commercial or residential?
yeah, it's that commercial, it's the special corridor zoning that they've got.
But now with the units that you can do on corridors, can you do, the city just did it, I'm not sure where the valley is. Or was it a state law, like 6 units?
I think that was,
city owned.
takes a single family zone and says you can do
Yeah.
Okay,
certain
That was-
densities on it.
so anyways, so to know what the zoning is, and
Yeah, this is the commercial zone for the corridor, so.
Yeah, it's a 2-acre parcel. I mean, there's a lot of potential uses for that much traffic. Has good access and utilities. It's,
yeah, when it's got the secondary access as well, because off the Dishman,
And Scout
Dishman
doesn't,
Road.
Scout doesn't give the zoning because it's in the city.
on a real high level, basically what we've seen is light industrial's gotten extremely expensive. Residential of any variety has gotten extremely expensive, especially multifamily. But frankly, commercial has softened. It's unusual, and I think that's probably a function of the COVID and the Class A office space, where everybody went home. That softened that market quite a bit, but this is a really, you're at Dishman Lake and Appleway.
Yeah, no, I could see, you look at the gas station that went in just off the freeway, which was a smaller lot and not as good of access. I mean, it's got good access coming off the freeway, but to try to get back, I mean, where this has great access to go anywhere. So, yeah. And I know the owner across Appleway, to the north of the property there, so I'd be curious what his thoughts are on what that value would be as well, so. Okay,
We'll go back, share some information, and let us know how you'd like to proceed. Appraisals are a very long lead item. For us,
Yeah.
it's 6 months to a year to get an appraisal back,
We're
so
in no hurry to sell the property, are we?
we've had it for a very long time.
That's a good place to be in then. If you don't like the appraisal, then being in no urgency to sell the property is a good place to be then.
so let's have you come back next week or in 2 weeks, I guess, we're not in any hurry. So maybe I'm not sure where our schedule is, but in a couple weeks, but I don't think we're in a hurry to sell it. And I want to make sure we have a good path forward.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you,
Thank you.
commissioners.
Okay, it's gonna take us to Doug.
Good morning.
Good morning.
See it from
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for your time today. Here with our Operations Division Manager, Kurt Chambers. And we thought we'd provide an update on our vehicle equipment lease and purchase plan. A little challenge that Kurt and the team have run into, and he's been working with Tony Hall, Shaylin in purchasing, and I believe they've identified a great path forward. So he'll speak to that. And I'm gonna turn it over to Kurt, so thank you.
Good morning, thanks for having us. Yeah, just as Doug said, I wanted to just inform of our plan forward to continue on the vehicle and equipment replacement. So a quick overview, last May 2022, Board of County Commissioners approved our 20-year equipment replacement program to incorporate purchases and leases depending on the vehicle lifespan and type. Our average age of the fleet was 25 years old, so we're trying to update our fleet, and the program revolved around the use of the funds from the sale of the Spokane County Raceway, 1.4 million. Once those are diminished, we will transfer costs to capital and operating budgets accordingly. Next slide. In 2022, I was able to initiate a lease for 6 new pieces of equipment on our mowing fleet using the Omnia Purchasing Group. All the mowers are slated for 60-month dollar buyout, so we'll own them after 5 years. 3 of the 6 have been delivered or on the ground. Next slide. We also initiated a lease through Enterprise Fleet Services, 15 vehicles. It's an open-ended lease. Our intent is to own them outright after 60 months. 9 of the vehicles are on the ground, 6 are still pending delivery of manufacturing. What made this lease really helpful, as we found last year, the manufacturers imposed restrictive allocations. For instance, Ford said Spokane County can have 3 vehicles to purchase. By using Enterprise Fleet Services, they were able to seek vehicles not otherwise available to us through their buying power and relationships with other dealerships. Next slide. In 2022, our purchases look like we were able to secure 3 purchases of equipment that were specialized using purchasing contracts. Vehicles, we were able to purchase 4. We had to defer 3 because of restrictive allocations from dealerships and the availability. So we're really struggling to push the plan forward as intended. We use purchasing contracts to secure these, and as we found from the initial estimate when the plan was proposed, prices were 5 to 10% higher, which is further making our plan a little more restrictive. So next slide, please. The path forward would be to lease additional vehicles, 6 additional vehicles that were otherwise identified for purchase that Enterprise is now making available to us. So these vehicles have been budgeted for and funded in our 2023 capital budget. My intent is to move forward with a 60-month dollar buyout lease. The cost is approximately 6% more than if we were to purchase outright, just because of interest and lease maintenance fees. However, these vehicles are not otherwise available to us right now, and we expect 2024 costs to go up 8 to 10% anticipated. The price from 2022 to 2023, we're seeing 10 to 15% on average. Next slide. So if we were to look at the dollars and cents, lease costs roughly 6% above the outright purchase. But we're seeing price increases every day we wait, and availability is forcing us to wait. So potential savings, if we were to move forward with this lease today, would be roughly 4% as compared to waiting another year. and seeing another 8 to 10% price increase on these. So for us, Enterprise has, next slide. Enterprise has has made it available for us to get the vehicle and by using their partners. So our next steps would be to bring a resolution forward for Board of County Commissioners consideration on the next legislative session next week, authorizing the lease/purchase of 6 additional vehicles utilizing Enterprise Fleet lease via Sourcewell purchasing contract. Once that's been approved, we would work with the budget office to submit a budget transfer requesting the funds to be moved from our capital purchase to our lease budget. And with that, next slide. Let's open it up for comments if there are any.
Question?
Are you showing off your current?
We're showing off where we started from there.
With that.
It's something.
Kind of retro.
Yeah.
Retro,
Yeah,
colorful.
some of those are,
Repaint and you'll be fine.
they are classic, so ultimately, this allows us to acquire the vehicle in the timeframe we're hoping, and for actually less than what we would expect to pay if we further delay in hopes that they would be available a year from now. And so we feel that it's a really good option to keep us on track and ultimately save funds and better use the funds that we have to get this done.
Budget's all figured it out
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, I think everything is in place. We just have to.
I didn't look at this.
Oh, that's okay. Our accountant has, and I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't put Randy in the spot if we didn't know the funds were there. Again, we're just shifting from an outright purchase to a lease purchase, and so it's just moving them, as I understand it, from one account to another account that is used for such purposes.
I would just want to make sure the purchase, since we were planning to purchase this year, and if we're gonna, lease it, then that budget is set aside for each of those years. It doesn't go against your budget in the future years. That's what I just want to make sure of.
And the way that works, the majority is spent right up front of that, but thank you, that's a really good point.
Yes, because the funds are in our capital, I'll add to this. We were going to do a balloon payment. Because we already have the funds allocated and funded in our capital budget. We're gonna request a transfer. We'll do a balloon payment. So then the next 4 years, we'll just be paying the maintenance and interest out of operating budget.
Yeah, because I can say I know from construction trucks are hard to come by, just pickup trucks in general. So
Right.
yeah, no, it's a game as to who's got their name in, who gets it, and yes. So if you can get it, I would say
Great.
thing to do. There's the construction industry, I'll just say, is seeing it where it's like,
Yes.
and used trucks are going for crazy amounts too. So if you can get it through the fleet enterprise, then that's probably a great way to go.
Just like to give Kurt and Doug kudos on this. Usually we're last minute coming to you guys. The window's about to close and they're months ahead of this, so I appreciate that.
I assume you'll run it by Randy's office before we vote on it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yes.
Very good. Never hurts to have more eyes, right?
The
Well, yeah,
agenda
and that's part of the process too, quite frankly. Tony's team has entered the resolution into Civic Clerk, and there will be a budget office sign off and review, so that's already in the works, so it won't go before you unless the budget office signs off.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Kurt.
We get to test drive a new truck.
You know, Kurt would love to give you a tour of the ops.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
You do the mowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The zero turns are, very soothing.
An interesting field trip.
They were great to work with, they're really.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, sounds good. Back on track.
Lovely. Thank you.
You all. I'll let you
All right.
kick it off. Yeah.
Perfect. Nice to see you in person.
I was just thinking, when was the last time
I'll
Tony's
sneak
been
up
in
on you
this?
guys.
Not on Zoom.
Yeah.
Well, we are here for the second half of the promised presentation and information on ERP. So last time we met regarding Workday, which is the ERP software that the county will be moving to for our new ERP. And so this is the second half of that conversation, which is regarding Guidehouse. If you can go back a slide, please, Ron. Which is the professional services group that partners with Workday and with those companies or groups that are onboarding that system. So first of all, I just want to give a huge shout out to Tony, who has been negotiating this contract with the help of GFOA. That was their last kind of outstanding item on their contract with Guidehouse to ensure that we hit the approved dollar amount that we had for ARP funding, which they were able to come in by the skin of their teeth and hit. So it was a lot of negotiation over the last month. Tony's had some pretty good 14-hour days. I probably owe him a couple bottles of wine, but he's done a great job bringing this home. And so this contract has made it through legal. So Casey has done a final review, and so has Risk, Steve Bartel. So we are good to have this conversation at this point. So really the contract, and we'll walk through it a bit, really has changed significantly since when we first received it. The negotiation process was able to get us a contract that allows us to use milestones and deliverables in order to initiate payment with Guidehouse, which really will help us be successful in ensuring that we all achieve our deliverables and have a successful project that launches fully functional.
It'll just reduce the amount of change orders that you guys see. Basically, we have to have tasks completed to make payment. It's not based on just time and effort that they estimate to put on this. It needs to be a functional system for us to pay for it.
So next slide, please, Ron. So on this slide, you'll see the cost of this part of the contract. So this gets us to the remaining approved $8 million. So as you'll see on this slide, we have this contract that will be implemented through the end of 2025. The professional services itself is the statement of work and the work that Guidehouse will do in partnership with us and with Workday for all of the phases of the project. There are two additional line items on here. One is for travel and one is for extra support. So they are called out separately, as travel will really be dictated on the needs determined by both groups and pretty limited. Most of this will be able to be done remotely where Guidehouse won't need to come on site. But for things like Basecamp, where we're working hand in hand, going through our current processes, looking at future processes, they will be with us in those phases. So that $100,000 is designated specifically toward the travel that we will be utilizing them for. And then the extra support is additional line item that is specific to any additional work that we may need help with, or additional assistance after go live. Within the professional services contract itself, there is, it's a transition, so to speak, between each of the phases, where they do have support for 4 weeks after we launch a phase. So we do have some of that built into the contract itself, but in the event that we need additional services outside of the standard, we do have this $145,000 earmarked as well to utilize for additional support. We are very hopeful we won't need to use it, but it's there just in case. I think it's important to note on this, while we do recognize and are so thankful for the significant investment in this project, just as a reminder, this was not the highest ERP that was presented to us through the RFP process. So we are not quite at the top end. Originally, I think we said we potentially between 4 and 9.5 million is kind of where we estimated. We're coming in right around 8. But just as a reminder, that leaves us with about 0 contingency. So we are right there. And so we were able to get to where we needed to be, similar to what you just heard in the last presentation, where we were a year and a half ago when we started this process. Prices have increased, services have increased. And so, you know, we're right at that 8 million without any contingency there. As Tony had already discussed, all of our payments will be based on deliverable acceptance models, which are detailed in the contract. And this was a really big win as well for both parties. It really creates incentive to complete the project. But the final 10% will be based on acceptance of deployed and stable system for each of those stages. If I remember correctly, Tony, it started at 5%.
Yep.
And so Tony and team was able to get that to a 10% mark, which just creates a little more skin in the game for both groups.
A little bit higher than industry standard, so that was a good win for us. And on the pricing side too, they did reduce by about $230,000 from their initial proposal. So saved a little bit there.
Next slide, please, Ron. So just as a reminder, we are getting ready to kick off here in July. So I want to give a huge shout out again to purchasing, legal, risk, the ERP team in general. We are on target for timeline, which I think to all of us is a pretty big win in itself. This has been a huge endeavor. We had hoped for a kickoff in July, and we're going to be able to make that happen. So we are still on track for schedule. The official kickoff will be July 17th for our phase 1 financials. And then the chart shows here, phase 2 kickoff will be in January of 2024 for HCM, which will include the payroll portion. Phase 3 will be December of 2024 for adaptive planning, which is that really cool budget tool that I know Randy and all of us are very excited about. And then phase 4 of March of 2025 will be talent, people analytics, and journeys, which kind of wraps up the back end of the HR segment. Next slide, please, Ron. So next steps for this room and for today is just a reminder, we did have an MOU that we put in place a couple weeks ago designating the funds to this project, and we are just finalizing this contract. So that needs the signature of the chair to finalize this. We have already, our purchasing and project management team has been actively engaging with Guidehouse and their project manager to map out a timeline of the next steps as we prepare for go live. So we're going to do some soft launch stuff before that to really make sure that we're ready to go, including they're working on a training program for those subject matter experts on the county side that will require some training before we kick off, so we can make sure we have all the pieces in place to have this launch be successful. We are updating you guys right now. We'll be updating the elected officials and department heads this afternoon in the 12:45 meeting today. We've been updating them as we've been getting through different parts of this, so that'll be the follow-up for that group this afternoon. And then we're going to do a soft kickoff with the internal project team next Thursday. So the group that has been really actively involved throughout the entire initial project, which has been working with Geo, with FOA, helping as a part of the RFP team, the subject matter experts that were in the room with us for 2 weeks, really vetting the systems. We'll do a soft launch, just kick off with them next week and really lay out the calendar expectations for the next couple of years. But really, what are going to be those key times that we all need to make sure that we're here, we're together, we're not on vacation, so that we can make sure we're appropriately blocking ourselves out to really ensure that we're getting through the crux of this, but then also to be able to notify our department leadership, our elected officials on what that schedule is going to look like for their staff as well, to make sure that we have the support that we're going to need to be able to get this to go. And then we'll do the official kickoff, like I mentioned, on July 17th. So we're very excited to be able to start working this process. We've had a lot of support and positive momentum, and this is going to be very exciting. I've also asked Rebecca to plug in and help from a communication standpoint. So we'll start launching a communication strategy as well. So there'll be different tracks of the communication plan. So there will be targeted material toward all county for updated announcements, targeted communication plan for our leadership, elected official department heads, targeted communication for the work groups. So we'll really be having those different communications drive to the different levels, the different needs, and really target the communication that's going to be relevant and informative for those specific groups. So she's going to tag in and help me with that as well. And so we really just want to continue to start providing updates, let people know where we're at in the process, and that way there's no surprises, right? There's no shock when we get to the point where we're ready to launch. We have everybody that's informed and knows what's going on. So that's where we're at. Questions or comments?
What does it mean payments are based on deliverable acceptance? What does that mean?
They have to do what they committed to in the contract to get paid.
In different phases.
Yep, I think there's 41 different deliverables that they have to hit throughout the next 18 months to be paid for that.
And within that too, when I was reading the contract, it's not just that they say, yep, we've done it. It actually has to then go to the county. The steering committee has to verify, yes, we have. There's a workbook, there's a tracking mechanism where both parties are signing off on that. So it's not like one group can just say, sure, we did it, and the others like, it doesn't work. You know, so there's that check and balance written into the contract. What's that?
10% retention.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's like the final
Yep,
10%.
at the end of
Yeah.
each
You
phase,
certified, you're done, you get an
Exactly.
extra 10%.
Yeah.
really, and that means the 10% is held until that phase is, or that portion of their task is.
We do recognize this is gonna be a huge project, so we've been talking with a few of us, really looking at for those key contributors. There's a solid chance I come back to you guys and ask about maybe some amended PTO policy. Do we allow them to do a cash out even if they haven't taken time, or an extension potentially where they're not going to lose PTO if they're unable to take it? So I'll come back and we'll talk through what questions we might have. But as we've been working with Yakima and Clark and other counties who have gone through this, they've had a few recommendations for us to make sure you find a healthy balance for your staff, because if they can't take time, we want to make sure that they don't feel like they're not being rewarded for the effort. So had some really good learning lessons from those work groups we've already been working with. So we'll be coming back in the future if we do have any requests on maybe an amended policy or something like that specific to those people that will pretty much be locked into this project. And so more to come on that, but we're really doing our best right now to figure out what does this need to look like and how do we ensure that our staff wants to be part of the process and feels valued for being part of the process, because this is a huge initiative that's going to mean big things for the county. It's just a longer timeline of a project than what we typically see for these sorts of things.
Much more in depth, so it'll be at least one or a handful of people from each department in this. So, like in talking with Yakima, Clark County, it's the biggest internal project that we will probably take on, from the last 30 years to now, probably 30 years forward. It's
So on the timeline that you were talking about, January 1 of 2025 is the payroll. So 'cause I was trying to figure out how to see it here. So that's where we plan to go. Use the payroll package to its best effect, and to work with employees ahead of that and all of that to get us set up for light pay.
Yeah, so actually,
Light pay, but
I was gonna,
yeah,
normal pay. Yeah.
Normally people do.
Yeah, so I actually was hoping to add this to one of our strategic conversations in the next probably month or so. But part of this process is you run parallel payrolls before you go live. So we'll need to be on the normal schedule before January 1, 2025. So I've been working with the auditor's office and the budget office to figure out, okay, based on all of the work that we all do all year long, what would be the best time to implement the normal payroll cycle? And then to that point, what policies might we want to look at? What options are we going to have for staff to create the easiest, so to speak, transition to that? So I don't have an exact date yet. It will need to be in 2024. So when we have that, the goal, we will ask for approval no less than 6 months in advance to ensure our employees have adequate time to be prepared for it. Also, that's what's been drafted into all of our contracts that have accepted this language, is that 6-month lead time. And so when we're ready to have that conversation, which is within the next month or so, we'll be talking more about kind of the logistics of what that would look like, and read through any questions or issues that might be there. But that is something that will need to happen in 2024 prior to the go live in 2025.
When we did the Workday contract, I think Randy gave us a little handy chart that had kind of where the funding fits within the ERP allocation. Can we get an updated picture of what the overall project's at in terms of budget?
Yes, actually updated that last
Send it to me
night
this
and sent it to Tony. So yep.
That
So
would be good to look at.
yeah, it looks almost the exact same. Honestly, it's just one figure went from like 5.1 to 5.4. So it's just one shift in one cell, but I can definitely get that sent out to you guys.
So and then, so Workday is the software program, Guidehouse is the implementer, correct team. And so how many people do they have staff working on this?
So each of the different phases has its own kind of subject matter expert that they come with, but they have their own project manager on their side. They have their own their own steering committee, their own executive sponsor. They have subject matter experts, whether it be in IT or finance or HR. So it's a very robust team of people that will be partnering with the county. It's not like it's just one PM. It's a broad group, and we actually were lucky enough to meet most of them. They did come in person when we did the 2 weeks of just intensive deep dive. There were a few people who had to attend via Teams, but I want to say they sent 15 or so different people that we met and will be working with throughout this project.
I'd just like to thank Rose Kress, our business analyst. She's really the glue that's kept this whole thing together. I've been in the negotiation, but she's been a rock star. And then Frank Cervantes, our project manager. Frank is going to be the PM for this entire project. So we'll plug him into future briefs and updates for you.
Awesome. Thank you. So I guess I will be needing to sign a contract.
Yes.
Okay, Randy, you're next up.
I've got 5 minutes maybe. So this is just an annual resolution that we bring towards the board. It'll be on next week's consent agenda. This is to move the money, the excess dollars that are in the RID guarantee fund from that fund to the general fund. The RID guarantee fund is governed by RCW 3688-235. And in that, it says we have to have a guarantee fund that has cash equal to 5% of the outstanding bonds. We are now down to 28,000 of outstanding bonds in 2 issues. They should be gone by 2026, at which time this one may go away. But currently, we need to have $1,400 of cash in the account. We have a little bit over 35,000. And so this ordinance, because the RCW calls it an ordinance versus a resolution, that you will see will move $34,000 of cash out of that guarantee fund back to the general fund.
Why again?
Why move it out?
Yeah.
We only have to have 5% of the cash of the outstanding bonds in this fund.
Oh, okay, I
And
gotcha.
5% of those outstanding bonds is just over 1,400.
Gotcha.
And instead of moving the exact dollar amount, I like thousands, so just moving roughly. So we'll actually have about 6% of the bonds covered.
We rarely move amounts that little. It's like,
we could let it grow in a couple of years if you want.
So have we not done this in the past?
We've done this pretty much every year since there was a gap for a while, but I know when I got here in 17, I know we started doing it again. The first one was a little bit larger, but it's an ordinance you see every year. Typically, it comes from the auditor's office, but they requested that I presented this.
so if it's an ordinance, then it's a public hearing, right?
No, it's not, because Roy, that's a great question, because I asked the same thing. I said, why is this? It's not a public hearing ordinance. It's not like law. This one acts more like a resolution, but Roy Cogan gave an opinion many years ago to Jim that it had to say ordinance at the top instead of resolution, because the RCW specifically says it's an ordinance, but it's not a public hearing ordinance.
Those exist, Chris?
There are certain categories. There are certain categories depending on what you're regulating, you know, things, criminals type of stuff requires a public hearing. Other categories of code and regulation require a public hearing before implementation. But you know, not every single thing you put into code requires the public hearing. You know, for example, when you redo the meeting code, that will not require a public hearing, right? So categorically, yes, could go either way.
But I did ask the same question, I was like, do I really need an ordinance?
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
Thank you. Stop, I'm gonna take us to you, now that we're missing two commissioners.
Yeah, I was just
I don't know that we wanna, I mean, I hate to keep delaying, but I don't know.
Well, here's a suggestion. So what I've done, what Rebecca had done is consolidate again the feedback that the commissioners had given a couple weeks ago for the strategic planning topics. We grouped them into kind of categories. Hopefully that's helpful in seeing how some of them might be lumped together. I know we're going to talk about it more today. If there's any more additions on it, which you can certainly do. The idea that was suggested by the commissioners is to target the June 26th for our first one. And if you are good with that, Scott Chesney already has a presentation ready to go around kind of what does the next 3 years look like for preparing for the comp plan update. What are the expected activities to come in front of the board? And also, how is he planning on resourcing these? There's a combination of state funds coming in. There's a combination of ARP funds that were provided from the board to support this. So he is prepared to have that conversation on the 26th. Might be a good topic to step into. And then we can have some further conversations around any more additive things. And then what are the priorities? What are the next sequences of topics that the board wants to spend some time on? So open that up as an idea.
I think it'd be good to hear that start that conversation here from him.
Well, and I think especially since we just were kind of allocating some ARP dollars, what is, you know, I think that was kind of some of the questions. What does that mean for staffing and all of that? And I think knowing what the process is and why, you know, so I think that'd be really helpful. That so that would be good. I think what this probably shows is that as commissioners, probably we need to, you know, when Scott and I meet for the agenda, probably if anyone's going to be gone or out, to let Scott know. I mean, I don't know whether it's the chair or Scott, but if someone's going to be gone that next week by Wednesday morning, to let us know, so that way, you know, we can adjust some of these topics where you know, there's certainly times where it's like, I don't want to be doing something that's in your district, you know, or your district, that if you're going to be gone, or you know, that I just want to be respectful to all of that. And like this just shows we need all five of us to really be looking at the strategic items. So
I think the three of us are perfectly capable.
yes. But that might be better for you and I as we're planning to know who's going to be in and out, you know, the summer and all of that. So I would just say by the Monday morning to let Scott know. I don't know. Does that work?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think this one seemed like it was a good initial topic. So there's been some conversations around it to bring forward. It impacts all the commissioners fairly directly. And then the plan would be to keep it fresh in your minds, have a quarterly touch by Scott coming back. Okay, here's what we talked about last time. Here were some of the activities. Here's how we progressed on those. Here's what you can expect to see next. So it just keeps it top of mind for you, because this will be a long process. We know it's a 3-year process to get through all of the activities around our comp plan update, so that it's at the front of your minds when, you know, community's asking you about it, you know, various people who are interested in the comp plan activities.
I know I'm getting questions all the time when I'm out, Josh, I don't know if you were. I've got developers, it's like, you're gonna not let us do anything for three years, so that's.
I actually haven't had anybody ask me about it yet.
No? Oh, I've had several. So, I don't know if you have or not,
Yeah, there's interest in it.
yeah, so anyway, so no, I think it'd be, that's it. If he's ready to go, that's an easy one to start with.
He was listening in on the last conversations. He heard all the questions that were being asked by the commissioners. So he's got a nice slide deck to be able to walk through and kind of cue this particular piece up. I suspect maybe an hour or so of a conversation.
Might be good to dust that old strategic plan off in the first meeting and just kind of take a look at it and have an open discussion about whether we think it needs any updates. Could be a good starting point too.
Yep, we're
I see that's targeted on
finding
there.
that,
We're finding it.
and we'll be able to at least have it to
Might be
share.
very
by
dusty.
next week. Might be dusty.
We have
The shelf to get
posters.
stocked up.
There are posters everywhere.
Yeah.
I think you sent them out.
Chris actually sent them to.
Yeah.
There, it is. Look at that. It's got pillars and everything.
They're beautiful, they didn't need changed.
Because there's that on the poster too.
Yeah, so anyhow, there's more feedback on this. If you like the groupings, if we missed anything, I think we captured everything that was discussed a couple of weeks ago for additional inclusion on here. Some of them are gonna be, I kind of noted, some of them we talked about maybe 24 and beyond. But we can plug in a number of these into the planning sessions if we want to start spending some time on that next week and laying out what else is up next.
Well, and some of it we gotta, kind of, it'd be good to put some time frame. Like measure one is gonna be November, is when that drop, it's happening. So I put the kind of the date of the ballot, the election. The 13th Superior Court judge, we know the date is January, I don't know exactly, mid-January.
Yeah, mid-January.
So even just some of those to put dates in, just that we know that that's like in the abatement council. I did have Eric Johnson say, I think the state is starting to get nervous that people don't have them all accomplished. So I'm not sure, I want to get clarity what happens if we don't meet the date?
From what I understand, and Chris can help, is we aren't able to spend the dollars until the OAC is set up. And I think because of
Keep the dollars, I'm starting to hear some rumblings. That if we don't have it set up, they may, I don't know, when I was over in Chelan County, they were just getting their last cities to sign on, and then they were done, and Eric Johnson was just making some comments that the attorneys are getting a little nervous, and that the money's may not get spent, as I believe. So I just want to, different people may be hearing different things, and so I just want to make sure we know where we're at. And if we don't have the city come along with us, do we just set it up ourselves? I mean, I haven't heard where we're at, and I know, I think we've got a meeting coming up with the city, but I don't know where we're at with the other entities that need to participate.
we've had a number of them that have reached out, expressing their interest to be part of it, from Spokane Valley to Stevens County, Ponderay County. A lot of the other counties have expressed interest in being part of this.
I think we just need to get those agreements done then.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be done by the end of June, right? Was the initial?
Well, it was initially June 1. That was what the attorneys were saying, and now I think they're trying to guide us towards July 1 thereabouts.
So if we have everybody else ready to sign on, I think we need to get that figured out, so.
And I think at least as far as getting agreement from the others who have expressed interest in joining, we have simply been waiting to make sure that this next meeting doesn't lead to any changes in the document before sending it to those other parties to, for their agreement. But the impression that I have is that the other, aside from the city of Spokane, the other parties who have expressed interest in participating are not don't have any specific needs or specific issues that they are concerned about, as long as the structure that we have is covering all of the needed elements.
Is there a most recent working draft that we could see?
Well, there are a couple of working drafts because we have, like we kind of discussed a little bit, right? There are a couple of options for how, how to set up voting structure, how to do that. So I believe at present we have at least 2 working drafts. We're happy to share those with whoever wants them, but again, as soon as we kind of nail down who is and maybe is not participating.
I'd like to peek at the most recent drafts before the next meeting.
Sure, that should be no problem.
We do have a meeting with the city of Spokane tomorrow to talk further about that, because they came back with a different proposal. And I'm hopeful that we can kind of talk through maybe differences of perspective on what the regional OAC is and what it's not, and kind of guide us towards a collective approach on standing this thing up. So I think that's just our last piece, is what's the city of Spokane going to do?
Can I see their proposal too?
We got a copy. Or Dale have one?
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know if you'd be interested, I mean, because I know Chelan County they're kind of taking the lead, because they've got the city of Wenatchee, Douglas County just across the river. I forgot that Douglas County is just across the river, so East Wenatchee is in Douglas County. And all of that. So I'm happy to reach out to one of the commissioners if you want a copy of theirs. You guys are.
Yeah, no, I think we've got, as far as the setting up the legal structure is, we're all set.
Yes.
It's getting everybody on board. And once everybody says go, the legal side of it's.
How quickly will we get it approved? Because are we the last ones to approve it, because everyone else need to approve it first?
It's not, there's not really a sequencing of it. It's not our Spokane County OAC, it's the Spokane region of the 10 jurisdictions that are part of it. So we are but one entity in the amongst the 10.
It's not even just in Spokane, because it's neighboring counties
Yes.
too.
Yeah,
It's not,
there's 6 counties and 4
when
cities.
you say jurisdictions, it's not like Spokane County and the cities within it. It's beyond Spokane County too.
Correct. So while it will be, housed here and.
We're still taking the
we are,
lead.
and we are likely will have the most financial, amount that is involved. There is no, unlike a PDC or something similar, there's no required order of approval. I
Just wanna
think
make
even
sure we-
after we set it up, other entities could potentially sign on later.
I think we just need to try to get this done as quickly as possible now.
Absolutely.
So put that as a priority.
We can actually add that to next week's Monday, give an update on our conversation with the city, and say, hey, here's the agreements. If you're comfortable with how these look, we're ready to move forward, and starting to queue them up for approval by the commissioners.
Yeah, and then I guess it'd be good to know then too, which counties have already inquired back saying that they're willing to go.
Yep.
Versus which ones haven't, so we can reach out to them to say, okay, we gotta get going on this, so.
We've been tracking that as well and doing some reach outs, so.
Because I'm happy to reach out to any commissioners I need to.
Okay.
So. Okay, so those are, just looking at it, it's a pretty long list, but it's like there's sometimes that's more immediate than other stuff. So to make sure we're getting to that immediate stuff.
This is just me personally, but it is not imminent, but I'd like to kind of do a little legislative debrief before we start developing the new agenda. I haven't been part of that, so I don't know when that typically starts, but.
In about December.
Okay.
Right before we break for
Last
Christmas.
minute, huh?
I think we would all like to do it sooner, because yes, our legislative kind of roundtable with the legislators was when we were on break. So, because we were not, and I think,
We regularly put a pin in it over and over and over and over, and then it's like, oh crap, they're like heading over to Olympia. We
Yeah.
should probably get on
I'm
them.
up fast, I'm
so
sure.
I think yeah, if we can talk to Jeff to say kind of, when do we think the issues need to be turned into for the earmark discussions with the senators and Kathy's office, to kind of get those dates down. And then, legislative agenda, kind of mirror that as we start to look at what those opportunities are. And I think we should get a good feel for too, what I'd like is, like Lan's talking about how many millions of dollars came into the fourth district, to really see what came into Spokane County. From earmarks as well as from capital budget, because there's just a lot of people asking for capital budget requests that are not the county or the city. And so, it's trying to be cognizant of that.
Burgess may have given us I mean, I don't know how complete it was, but it was pretty extensive. It included
I didn't think like I saw the-
government asks and non-government asks, but I don't know if it was totally complete. And I think he even said that. This may not be everything, he says, but this was most of what came to the region.
Because I didn't remember seeing the conservation district on there. But I don't know.
And that-
So anyway, I mean, those are just, as we look at it, for that, having that information ready for us at that point in time, I think would be helpful.
And I don't know if we need or can do any more thinking about, can we be more proactive in reaching out for dollars, federal or state, with grants or otherwise?
Well, so there's the idea of it too, I don't know if you guys have had conversations with different firms, but, Brandy's just left, but Brandy and I talked about, as we start to look at budget cuts in the future, and I shouldn't say cuts, a tighter budget, are there grant opportunities that we're not getting that we should be going after? And how do we do that, and who helps us with that? There's federal lobbyists that help you look at that from the federal perspective, as well as some of them know the state, but commerce grants are coming out. So is that something that we want to look at? Burgess doesn't help us do that. He's more just on the strict lobbying side. So there's Randy. I was just saying, Randy, you and I talked about, do we look at a lobbyist firm that does on the federal side that helps us, as well as looks at kind of state grants that are available as we look at what the budget looks like to the future? Is that worth the cost to see, and it can pay for itself? And is that something that we should look at to see, would that be worth looking at this year, coming up to help us? Because I know Adams County, they got like over $10 million in earmarks. We're not getting that. And so there's different groups that are helping those counties do that. And so it's not inexpensive. It's like $100,000. But is that, a good way to use some of our dollars to really see if that could be beneficial this, as we look to next year, because we almost have to start this year. So I think it could be, I think it's worth trying to see. But who knows, Jeff? Who's Jeff? What are your thoughts? I mean, I guess, you kind of know some of how that works as well. If that's, I think, maybe worth an opportunity to see what it would happen and what it could bring to us.
For the federal earmarks, this coming year will probably be the same as last year since it's a 2-year Congress. And last year we couldn't really put earmarks in early because it was March before they even decided the rules. The chairs of the Senate and House Appropriation Committees in DC, the rules kind of change each Congress, what they'll accept. I think there's 13, maybe it's 12. Different budget vehicles will go through Congress, like in the House, about half of those budgets you could accept, like THUD was accepting applications. There were other budgets that they said don't apply, we're not doing it in the House. So you have to kind of find out what the rules are. The House this year had a requirement for a federal nexus on any earmarks. The Senate did not have that requirement. The House limits how many earmarks and the dollar amount per earmark. The Senate has no limits on those, this particular Congress. So I'm assuming, which can always be dangerous, that 2024 for the 25 budget next spring will be under the same rules because it will be the same Congress, same chairs. But then in the odd number years, you do have to wait federally. That doesn't mean you can't start getting your list together and kind of working it through each of the 3 federal offices and get a sense for what they have interest in or not. But you might want to have a longer list to pivot at the end, like this year when we found out, oh, there has to be a federal nexus. We only had one of our 3 requests that actually had a federal nexus. And so those sorts of things can alter the playing field.
So is it worth trying to maybe, I'm seeing kind of 3 head nods. Is it worth doing like a request for proposals just to see what proposals are out there?
I would say, yeah, I mean, it could easily pay for itself. One big grant would pay for itself.
Yeah, and we don't have to, they can all propose, and if we may not choose any of them, but at this point, we've got 3 people willing to kind of
Look into it.
look into it, yeah.
Explore it.
Yeah, I see no harm in exploring it and potentially an upside.
Yeah, just because if we don't start now, we're already gonna start to get behind.
Oh yeah, the fall is coming quickly.
Yeah.
You know, it's nice legislatively in Olympia to get requests in before the legislative days, which are usually between Thanksgiving, Christmas sometime. The earlier you get stuff in, the more likely it is. But then you never know, like we had multiple transportation requests in until they were stripped out the last weekend.
Yeah.
That's
But if-
life in political realms, nothing's done until it's done.
Right. I'm just thinking the proposal process is a 3-week process. So I mean, so we're already be a month. towards
Oh
the
yeah,
end.
for an RFP.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get it out, we have to leave it open 3 weeks. With procurement,
End of July.
we were able to move a little bit faster in the world of ARP.
That's a good
moving
thing
it
you asked,
outside the
Chris.
county procurement, but yes, if you started it now,
Time melts away.
yes, especially with the 4th of July, you'd probably be looking late July at the earliest to see.
I just know, like, the City of the Valley has talked about how they've liked having their federal lobbyists to, helping get in for grants.
And they've done well with their Bridge to Valley project.
Yeah.
Getting money for the rail crossings.
Yeah, so. Okay. Maybe,
We're gonna work with procurement on
yeah, getting an RFP out.
getting something going.
And Brandy, you'll help us find the money. Thank you. But yeah, it is one grant, I mean, yeah, it can certainly will pay for
Oh,
itself,
for sure, yeah.
so.
And as if the commissioners decide to step into this and we start finding or wanting to pursue grant opportunities, we need to make sure we're really closely tied in with our 6-year transportation capital project plan. It's generally the starting point for Kyle and his team to go out and pursue dollars if they're transportation related. Not all these things would be, but we don't want to get out of sync with chasing after dollars that aren't in our capital plan either. So we just need to make sure those are.
Well, they usually have to
tightened
be
down.
in the capital
Yes.
plan to be awarded, like, I had to do some follow-up, sending some stuff into Cantwell's office this year. I was a little surprised she didn't give us anything, considering the follow-up work that we did. But yeah, generally you have to show it in your 6-year plan for it to be awarded unless it's some sort of a emergency type thing.
But there's options, grant options for, public safety,
Non-transportation,
just,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of other things too. that,
just was flagging that one particular piece.
Head stuff, I mean, just, there's all kinds of, and I've had different legislators being like, you're not asking, Spokane's not getting any of this, you guys aren't even asking for it, like, I don't know to ask for it. So I mean, so I think, I think it'd be asking on the state side as well as federal,
One
got
question,
opportunities.
would you be looking for a firm to identify, but current staff at the county would be doing the applications? Or is it a firm to both identify and help get it actually written and get it in?
So my understanding, you guys can correct me, is that they'll review, they'll help identify, and then they'll help review the application to make sure it's not missing something that, since they see a lot of those, but I don't think that they actually write them.
I think that's common. I mean,
We will have
for the
to,
right amount of money, you can have any of the above.
yeah, which means, I mean, I know the sheriff's office just got a grant writer, Esther got replaced, finally, I shouldn't say finally, she retired like a year and a half ago, and they now just replaced her position or filled her position. I think Public Works has a grant writer.
Yeah, I believe on Brandy Collier's team. They do grant writing for the majority of the transportation grants that they go after.
And then I know, in community services, they do some grant writing in there. So I mean, I think we just gotta figure out where it would fit within our, because we're gonna have all the knowledge. I'm just thinking, they don't have the knowledge of the county to write a grant.
Well, even like with our federal earmark requests, with transportation related, I don't know who wrote them, but Matt's Air Corps makes it happen.
Yeah.
The scope of work comes from him and then we fill in the other details.
But I would certainly want them to review grant applications to ensure that everything's filled out appropriately, because I'm sure they're seeing it from several different jurisdictions.
Then there's also firms in DC thinking federally that they'll actually work a little bit further downstream, upstream, one direction, I don't know, where they actually try to influence how the grant is written to make it more likely for, okay, we know you're looking for bridge projects. So they try to work with the appropriate elected offices to get more money into those camps, those options. So that's another thing that I know some firms do. I don't know if you're looking at just local firms, if we're looking at DC
I think
firms.
as you put the RFP together, you'll
See
figure that out.
who applies, but so there are those two aspects, both getting it written, but also getting what's put out that we can apply for a better fit for what we're looking for.
That means we know what we're looking for.
That would be an assumption on that one, yes.
Well, and kind of back to the CIPs, even outside of transportation, we do have our 6-year CIP that covers, we have sewer, we have transportation, we have 6-year that covers everything else. So whether it's parks, whether it's capital for our buildings, for IT, for the sheriff's department. So there's still a lot of places that the commissioners could point to say, that's an area that we don't have funding yet, we know it's a need. This is something we really want to target. Matching with a firm who can help guide some of those things through could be beneficial.
I see Commissioner Waldorf just rejoined. So, so anyway, I think you've got the head nods to let's
Okay.
see.
So I'll work with Tony and try to get something drafted to bring back for you guys to look at.
That'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so then that takes us to anything else, Scott?
We've got one item under miscellaneous.
Okay.
So at 12:30 today is our elected official department head meeting. We're going to be presenting to them kind of a early look at the budget forecast that we've been sharing with the commissioners and kind of guide the approach on what we're gonna take with the budget letter that we sent out to them. Randy and I were talking last week. He's identified something that he thinks we ought to adjust in the budget letter and wanted to share it with the commissioners.
Thoughts on it?
As we were looking at the letter, putting the packet together last week, it just, I don't know if the disingenuous is the correct word, but it felt weird asking people for additional requests, both in people and or supplemental requests for O&M, when we're probably looking at anywhere from a 1.5 to, I'd say, $10 million shortfall to start with as we go into this budget cycle. Do we really want to be asking them for those things? So this letter basically takes that out. So we have two versions of our presentation for today. One is the letter you saw last week or the week before, which we just increased this language to say that for the more than 6 months, if positions have been, make it more than 6 months versus for a while. So we've got that presentation ready to go, where then we do ask them for any supplemental requests for staffing O&M plus the capital. Or we have this version where it just says, plan your budget, stay about the same place you were last year on O&M unless you're moving some people around to cover that and asking for 6-year capital. Sales tax, as we know, it is slowing down. The state gave us some verbal stuff on Friday. Sounds like it's going to be about like last month was, not much different. We're not seeing a big decrease or anything. But originally, when we were saying a 0% increase, that was based upon this year's budget. So if we end up short of this year's budget, that could be another $7 to $2 million shortfall. So, how do you want them to proceed? I don't want to tell people put in all this work for all these supplementals and we're just going to say no, because that just, why make them go through the work? And that's what they felt like last year, where I put in a supplemental, but you didn't have the money to do it. So do we want them to go through that effort, or do we wait until the initial numbers come in and then just say, hey, we've got extra money, ask for more supplementals then, or if we are way under, we just say, then we have to decide what the next steps are going to be. So how do you want to proceed, basically?
And the most up-to-date forecast that Randy and his team are showing is looking like we'll be more than 6 million short out of balance next year. So that doesn't go along with put your supplemental request in. It goes along with we need to have some adjustments to our budget to get within balance. So striking that language, I think, would line up with what we're going to be presenting them today with that $6 million deficit. And then an ability to, at a later point in time, once the September roll-ups, the initial look that you all get from budgets, where does that look, and where might it inform on opportunities to invest, or there are further opportunities to add cost to the budget.
There's no good answer.
No.
So, I think if people felt that the supplementals, requests, they put a lot of time and effort in, they came and presented, and it didn't happen. Some got it, some didn't. I think as we know, it's like, there's gonna be some people that will, come and say, okay, I can't live within my budget.
Exactly.
And they're gonna have to.
Because there are some fixed costs we know increase, and we're gonna have to increase those areas.
Yeah. So we're gonna get it organically, I guess. So I don't know. And then just because somebody had their budget, does that mean that that's still the budget they need? I guess that's the other question I have in departments is, as
Agreed.
I don't,
I point it out every year.
Yeah.
We allocate a certain number and there's a ton that's not spent at the end of the year. There's a lot of departments that consistently, not just 1 year here, 5 years later there, again, no, it's every year for like the last decade, there are certain departments that just have, we're giving them too much money. I mean, it's just, we're allocating too many funds to certain departments. It's not a trend, it's not just a here, it's the norm for certain departments, so.
I don't see how we're not going to be in a position to have to make budget adjustments downwards based on where things are forecasted at. So I think stripping the language regarding supplemental requests is good. Doesn't make them do a lot of work. Doesn't mean that they if there's something changes dramatically on sales taxes and our financial projection improves, it can always be something that is later or targeted by the commissioner to say we want these 3 or these 5 departments to do. This thing should be, if we walk out of today's meeting and any of the elected officials or department heads don't understand that we are in a budget deficit projection for next year, they haven't been paying attention. So that's the messaging this afternoon that we're going to be sending. So I think stripping that language out is actually a good approach. And then we've just talked about, please look at your vacancies for greater than 6 months to help us kind of close some of that gap.
I'm okay with that.
I think it's a good idea to take out that language. And if there's a special case where, you know, there was a grant received or revenue that's specific to that department, you know, for a position or for certain funds, they can always bring that forward to you, Randy, correct?
Correct, but we tried to, if grant funds are being lost, for now, most positions are filled with the understanding that if that grant goes away, that position will be going away also.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have funds in the general fund to just pick those up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other items on this? I've got one. Okay, so miscellaneous, I've had a few people here recently ask me like who's on, like who's in the attending our meetings. And so is there a way that you can produce a list that you can just get out to the commissioners so we all know who's on the, not on the panel, but in the.
Changes, I could screenshot beginning or keep a list. And I mean,
you can just screenshot it as, you know, at the beginning, at the end, or whatever. I don't know, it's just, you know, as Lance was one of those I was talking to, and he was like, oh, I zoomed in, you know, when you did some of the other presentations, I'm like, I don't know who's zooming in or not zooming in.
You wanna show
So-
where it's at? Sometimes it's names, sometimes it's a phone
They
number.
don't put their name, man.
Sometimes
Oh,
it's
come
not
on.
even a real name.
No,
You
which
just
is
never know.
fine. I think it just, if we had that information, that'd be just good information to have, to see who's zooming in. Some people I know, some people I may not. But that, and then on the 2 o'clock, when we do the panel, we allow people as panelists, I would just have the commissioners, if anyone's zooming in as a commissioner, and unless somebody's speaking, just because then it gets pretty busy. I would just keep it to, you know, at that point, it's really the commissioners are the ones who are part of the meeting. And then,
There's another thing, so when we've done, and I don't know if Commissioner Waldorf has mentioned this, when we do the homeless coalition meeting, the regional homeless meeting, and I assume you probably know how to do this, but what shows up on the screen are only the people that have their camera on. So when you turn their when they turn their camera, so right now, if we had this up there, only we would be visible. And now Commissioner Waldrop would only, the two screens would there you go. So when someone turns off their because a lot of people are promoted,
Right.
but if they have their camera off, then they don't, maybe that's a better way to do it. That way it's not
Not everyone has a
cluttered.
camera on when they're presenting.
What's that?
Not everyone has a camera on when they're talking or presenting.
Oh, most people turn it on. I know, not all.
But I mean, our executive staff isn't speaking at the 2 o'clock meetings unless they're presenting. And so that's why it kind of, I just have noticed as I'm trying to look, it's like it's easier than I'm seeing if the commissioner who's on Zoom is raising their hand and wanting to speak, not having it as cluttered. I can do that, would just be helpful. So those are just a couple little housekeeping things that I was just like, I'm just gonna ask when I have the chance. And then Commissioner Waldrop, while you're listening, we were just saying that we didn't really talk about the strategic planning list since we had 2 commissioners that weren't there at that time, that in the future, we're just gonna ask commissioners on the Wednesday morning before the next week to let Scott know if you'll be in attendance or not, just so that way we can plan the agenda accordingly. And I'm having it be Scott versus me as the chair, so it's just if the commissioners or your assistants can reach out to Scott and let him know, that would be helpful for us as we're planning agenda items, because there could be agenda items that, is specific to somebody's district that I would not want to have on if that commissioner wasn't there. So that's all. I think I'm done with all my miscellaneous little housekeeping things that I had. Any executive sessions?
We do have a handful, but with the lack of, not all the commissioners here, it probably would make sense to hold these until this afternoon, even though Commissioner Jordan asked me if there were going to be an exec sessions this afternoon, and I didn't think there were, because I thought they were going to be this morning.
I'll forgive you.
Yeah.
You lied to him.
I mean, but this is the premise.
As I
like,
understood at
knowing.
the time, I believe we would be able to accomplish these all this morning. So I know Chris has one that I think is important for all the commissioners to be there, and I've got 2. Probably you have 2, and I've got 2.
Any that can happen
Now,
versus.
my 2, I think, are both needing to be with all the commissioners.
I'm not sure how long Commissioner French is zooming in.
I think he should be zooming in for the full afternoon meeting.
I've got one I could probably do this morning. I've talked to a number of the board members individually about this, and I think should just be a pretty quick update because, again, I've had some individual conversations. So
Okay.
that would reduce my afternoon to 1 where I definitely need everybody present for.
I think some people thought that 2 o'clock was gonna go fairly quickly and have booked appointments after, so I just wanna make sure, and knowing how we tend to go over on our executive sessions, so we'll have to be not, and I don't wanna stop conversation, we need to we think something will take 10 minutes and it's 30.
It's a rookie move, CUNY, come on. You always go long.
I think the 2 that I've
It's not
got
till 4, so.
could go relatively quickly. Of course, it always depends on the questions, but it's the briefing in each of those would be less than 5 minutes.
And same with the one that I have for this afternoon, because it is a follow-up to one that we had last week, so hopefully.
Okay, so you have 2.
I have 2.
And you have 2.
Both of them are follow-up. I can do one of them probably this morning, because it really is just an update and not needing any real feedback, I don't believe at this point, based on the individual conversations I've had.
Okay, or, I mean, we can wait till this
That's-
afternoon and
and
just
that's
do
fine.
it all.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't think it'll take that long.
I don't believe it will.
Famous last words.
I know.
Right, I've not had the best track record lately, so don't.
If you don't have any questions, commissioners, they can go really quick.
It's a big if.
Exactly. So, okay, so then, good to know that we'll have 4 executive sessions items. How long do you think those will be?
Mine, 10 to 15 minutes each.
Okay.
And yeah, max 10 to 15 minutes each.
So, an hour.
Like I said, I can do
It's-
5 and
it's all
5
good.
on my 2.
Just be, just good for everyone to plan, their afternoon accordingly that way. So, I mean, I think that, to me, that's just helpful, so everyone knows. So, okay.
And there are no public hearings this afternoon. It's very straightforward consent agenda.
Does anyone want anything separately? No.
I do.
There's not that many items on it.
Yeah, no, there's
It's just a
not.
handful.
Yeah, so, I didn't know if anyone wanted to speak to anything separately or take anything
So
separately.
thanks for asking.
Yes, so, figure I'll just ask now. Okay, so then with that, it is 11:31 and we will adjourn since there's no other business to come before us at this time, and we'll see everybody at the 2 o'clock meeting.